I was like, that's how Disney can just do one story. And Songo, because we know they won't pronounce it Shongo. We know they won't pronounce it Shongo. So Songo will now be singing in English. The video games industry makes more money than the movie and music industries combined.
There is no other greater power on earth than the power of and in a story. This kind of power is having the ability to not just tell a story, but to make it the definitive story of a person, a people, or a thing. These days, 5 billion people are telling their stories on the internet through different formats, different means, different ways. But one of the stories that have not been told as much as it should be, and has been told most times by people who do not own the stories, is the story of Africa and African stories. These days, a lot of people are beginning to realize the importance of storytelling, the importance of telling African stories by Africans, from Africans, and with an African perspective. And one way, is through animation, anime, comic stories, AR, VR, all the new technologies, because that's the only way to actually make our story the definitive story. I have with me today the co-founder. He says he's not the CEO. He's the co-founder and the president of Kugali or Kugali. I don't know, but he would have to, tell us what it is himself. So, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm okay. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's start with the name before we go to your name.
Okay, Kugali is a word we came up with when my co-founders and I were trying to name the company, and we wanted a name that would be easy for anybody anywhere in the world to pronounce. Okay. So we wanted it to be an African name, but we didn't want a word that people would not be able to pronounce easily. So for example, we're thinking of, okay, let's name it something that has to do with fun, art, play. How do you say art in Igbo? How do you say art in Yoruba? How do you say play? And okay, you think of something like shere. If you spell that and a non-Yoruba person sees it, you're going to hear so many different pronunciations. Say. So we can't use that. We kept looking for different words. Now, my co-founder Hamid is from Uganda. Okay. So he speaks some Swahili.
Yeah, Swahili.
And there's a phrase there, Kujali. So it's J, Kujali. Yeah. And it basically means something noticeable or something that cannot be ignored.
Wow.
More or less. And we wanted to use that. Like, okay, this doesn't just name the company Kujali. But then someone had already taken that name. So we just changed it to a G.
Okay.
So we just changed it to a G and we got Kugali. Okay. And the thing is, it's still sounds African. When you write it, most people just pronounce it right the first time. They don't. It's not that difficult to learn, so it's easy to spell and all of that. That was what we were going for.
So it's not like there's a special tone to it when you say maybe Kugali or Kugali. It's just
we just say Kugali.
Just say it.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sitting with.
My name is Tolu Olowofoyeku. I'm a co-founder of Kugali Limited.
I looked up Kugali Media and I heard somewhere that it started as a podcast somehow. I don't know. Is that story right? Or can you tell us the right story? Since we're all about ensuring that people can own their stories and be given the platform and the tools to actually tell their own stories.
Yeah. So Kugali did start as a podcast. My co-founder and I, Ziki and I, we were wondering if anybody in Africa was making good quality content in the animation and comics and video game space. So Ziki is my childhood friend. We've been geeks since we had milk teeth. We used to watch anime together, so Dragon Ball Z, Digimon, read comics, all of that. And then as we got older and we were discussing the things we love, comics, video games and everything, and I wanted to make video games right from when I was very young. So I was working on that dream, I was working on that goal. Ziki, he's a writer, and just in the process of trying to do these things, as we got older, we started realizing people are not really doing this from where we are from. Like as a kid, you don't think in terms of, oh, this one is those people that do it. We don't. As a kid, you don't think
just
like
take
that.
everything.
It didn't occur to me as a kid when I said I wanted to make games. It didn't occur to me that no, people in Nigeria don't make games. Like, no, a kid doesn't think that way. So I would say I was fortunate enough that I had the dream early enough in life before I knew certain things. Sometimes the glass ceiling that many people have is because they are learning that this is where the limit is. There's a restriction here. So because they know there's meant to be a limit there, then they don't take certain steps. I already formed my dreams and goals before I knew what the limits were, which I consider it blissful ignorance. I think that's one of the things that puts me ahead of other people, because I didn't know that this is not supposed to work. So I just started doing it. So, but my point is, by the time we were old enough to start realizing that people around us, people from where we're from, are not doing the things we want to do. By the time we were old enough, we had already solidified our dreams, and we decided, okay, you know what? Let's check if anybody is doing these things. Let's check, not just doing these things, good quality ones. Because remember back in the day, let's say, when I say back in the day, let's go back like 10 years.
Okay.
If you heard that there was a new Nollywood movie, your expectations of that movie in terms of quality would already automatically be much lower than your expectations of a Hollywood movie. You've not yet seen the movie at all. You've not yet seen the movie. You don't know whether it's good. But the moment you hear it's from Nollywood, you assume that it won't be as good as what's coming out of Hollywood. So because there was that general expectation that the quality of entertainment coming out of Nigeria was subpar or below that coming out of, let's say, America. Because of that carried over to things like comics. You would say, oh, if it's a Nigerian comic, it can't be as good as, like, the X-Men or Superman or Spider-Man or whatever. So what we started out as was a podcast whose goal was to discover the best quality content in Africa and help other people discover that content. So what that looks like is we would search for video games, we would search for animation, we would search for comics created by Africans, and we would talk about them on the podcast.
Like, at what point did you say, yes, I think we should now take this to the next level?
I would say 2 years after starting the podcast. So we started the podcast in 2015. And after we had 3 seasons of the podcast, so roughly 60 episodes. That took about 1.5 years.
That's a whole lot, I must say.
Yeah, so after about 1.5 years, we had pretty much covered the entire space. There was nobody that was doing anything significant in the space at that time that we did not know about, that we had not interviewed. So if you mention any of the big names in the space right now, we interviewed them back then.
Wow.
We had interviewed everybody. We had talked, even the people we didn't interview, we had talked about them on the podcast. We had showcased their work. We had attempted to monetize what we were doing without any success. And then after, like I said, we did that for 1.5 years. Then after the 3rd season, we just never did a 4th season because we started looking at things like, number one, we're pretty much out of content. There's nobody we've not already covered. There isn't enough content being created. That's the thing. Not enough comics, not enough video games.
Okay.
We ran out of video game content the fastest, because if there were 20 comics, there were 4 or 5 video games.
Wow.
And maybe 10 animated shorts.
Whoa.
So, and video games, that's my thing. That's my main focus. So for me, it's like, that's even the one that ran out fastest.
Yeah.
So when we then started looking at, okay, there's a bigger problem here. There isn't even enough content being created. How do we facilitate the creation of that content? How do we help all these people we've discovered? With all the interviews, we knew their pain points. How do we help them create faster, better? We always had a vision of having a kind of magazine similar to Shonen Jump. Shonen Jump is a Japanese magazine. It's serialized. I think it's monthly or weekly. No, it's weekly. Weekly Shonen Jump.
Yeah.
And in that magazine, they would have maybe different mangas. So, let's say Bleach, Naruto, One Piece. They would have different mangas in one issue. We always had that vision of having a book where we would then collect some of the best stories.
Yeah.
So you just get this Kugali book and you're getting the best comics in
best
Africa.
picks.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was what we were looking at transitioning into, and that's eventually how we switched from podcasting to publishing. The first thing we printed, we called it the Kugali magazine issue 0. Issue 0 because we were not sure there would ever be an issue 1. So Kugali magazine issue 0. It was black and white. I should have brought a copy here.
Okay.
Black and white, 40 pages. It had 3 comics. One from Nigeria, that was Oro by Hafiz Olua and Benley Maverick. One from Zimbabwe, Razor Man by Bill Masuku. And one from Kenya, that was Dunamis by Salim Busuru.
Okay.
So that's Avandu Comics. That's the name of his company.
Okay.
That was our very first publication.
First one, yeah.
I think mid 2017. 40 pages, 3 comics from 3 different African countries. So from the get-go, we were very collaborative. You have a good stuff. You have good stuff. You have good stuff. You guys bring your stuff. Let's help you. We're all helping each other.
Yeah.
Yes, we will make money from it. You will also make money from it. We're helping you get your content in front of more people. We're taking our cut. You're getting your cut. Everybody's happy. That was how we started, and everything else has basically been a natural evolution of that.
Now, there are a lot of comic books when I was growing up, when we were growing up, that died a natural death due to many reasons. And, you just talked about, how it's not really very financially rewarding back in the years, maybe not now anymore. How have you been able to sustain, or what has inspired you to just continue in the space?
So, as much as I can present this to make it look like we were business geniuses, but the truth is we just got very lucky because there was hardly anybody doing what we were doing.
Okay.
So
how do you describe what you were doing?
Okay, so let's put it this way. I just told you that our first publication had 3 different comics from 3 different African countries. I don't think you can name a single other company that was doing that, curating African content like that in this space of comics, animation, video game. Anybody else you mentioned was probably publishing their own thing. They were making their own comics and publishing. They're trying to make their own game. They publish. They make their own animation. There was nobody that was trying to be Shonen Jump. There was nobody that was trying to say, hey, look at what we're doing in Africa as a continent. Not, oh, we're one Nigerian company.
Yeah. Trying to sell.
And look at our comics. This is we from the get-go, like I said, right from the podcasting days, we were trying to showcase the best of Africa.
Okay.
Right, even before we started publishing. So nobody else was doing that. And that's why we were getting traction even when we might not have known all the right things to do at the time. Of course, over time we've been learning with experience, but when we started, it's not like we had this very good plan and knew that these are the steps to take. Yes, we were giving it our best, but I mean, even right from the moment we launched the podcast, before launching that podcast, we did our research into how to launch a podcast successfully. We, at the time, Spotify was not yet a thing.
Yeah.
So the best place for podcasts was Apple Podcasts. And Apple Podcasts were responsible for about 80% of the podcast listens in the world as of 2015.
Yeah.
So it meant if your podcast was doing well in other places and doing poorly in Apple Podcasts, you're not getting that much traction. But if you're doing well in only Apple Podcasts and you're doing poorly everywhere else, that's already about 80% of the traffic you need.
Yeah.
Because we did that research before launching, 4 weeks after we launched our podcast, we were already featured in New and Noteworthy on Apple Podcasts. That wasn't an accident. We knew the steps to take to get featured in New and Noteworthy because we studied. So my point is, yes, we did put in effort. We did our homework, but we didn't know everything that we were meant to do. We didn't know the industry. And to start with, there was no real industry on the continent. There was an industry outside the continent. The industry on the continent was in its infancy. But because we were the only ones curating, that's what I think separated us from the pack. Because when the BBC interviewed us, that was where I would say that's where our big break started. We had done a successful Kickstarter in, was that 2017? No, I believe we legally registered the company late October 2017, I think. So then we did our Kickstarter February 2018. That Kickstarter was to crowdfund. The Kickstarter was to crowdfund the first Kugali anthology. Now, at this point, we had done Kugali magazines like 4 times.
Yeah.
Because after that issue 0, we did issue 1.
All in a space of how many years?
Less than a year.
Less than a year.
Because let me see. No, issue 0 came out, I believe, 2017.
Yeah.
Yes. And in that same 2017, I think September, October, November, those 3 months, each month we released a new Kugali magazine. I believe so, yes.
Yeah, that actually.
So the same 2017, each magazine, remember I said issue 0 was just 40 pages, black and white. So from issue 1, it was 60 pages, colored, still the same thing, 3 comics from 3 different countries. After each comic, we'll put an interview with the creator of the comic. So you don't just read the comic, you find out a bit about the person who made it. And funny enough, we registered the company in the UK because my co-founders are both based in the UK, Hamid and Ziki. They're both based in the UK. So we registered the company there. And we were printing these Kugali magazines with funds we got from the British Arts Council. So I'm calling out the Nigerian government now. You need to do more. You need to do more for your people here.
Okay.
The British Arts Council gave us the money we were using to print.
Yeah.
Because they saw the issue 0 that we did with our own funds from our own pockets. I don't know how to get that kind of money from the Nigerian government if I have any projects to run here.
And it wasn't like they had a price on your back or
No. The Arts Council grants was money that you didn't have to pay back or anything. You just, as long as you used it to do what you said you were going to do, and then you put their Arts Council logo on what you produce. So on the Kugali magazines, there's a small logo that says funded with Arts Council UK, whatever. But so this is late 2017. We had done like 3 magazines. 3 or 4, let me see. magazine, one
Zero,
standard,
zero,
no,
one.
zero, then one standard edition, one Raki edition, two standard edition, two Raki edition. Okay, so that's like five. So what we were doing, standard edition is supposed to be all ages. Raki edition is supposed to be for older audiences. We wanted to separate it so that we don't limit the creativity of our creators. If someone wants to create a comic and the kind of story he has in mind is not suitable for kids, we didn't want to tell him, we won't be able to sell this, tone it down, change this. We said, no, we'll put your own in a different package. If parents want to buy comics for their kids, let them buy the standard edition. But if an adult wants to buy a comic for himself, let him buy. So we, by the time we were doing the Kugali anthology, it was meant to be an upgrade of the magazines.
Okay.
The magazines were 60 pages, the anthology 200.
Oh, okay.
So that Kickstarter, we were trying to raise funds to print two anthologies, standard edition and Raki edition. And each of them had, the standard edition had 3 comics, the Raki edition had 4 comics, I believe. But they were both collections from across the continent. By the time you put the two of them together, we were representing about 7 countries.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I mean
At
by...
that time.
That's what I mean by nobody else was doing that. So that Kickstarter raised, I believe, $25,000 in early 2018.
Okay.
$25,000. And the BBC saw that and thought, that is interesting. Let's do a story about these guys. So they interviewed us in mid 2018, and that interview didn't actually come out until January 2019. So until January 2019, I couldn't actually tell anybody I've been interviewed by the BBC.
Yeah, because you can't.
There was
it's
no
not out there, no proof for it. Yeah.
But then the moment that interview came out, January 2019, that was when Disney Animation reached out to us, because they saw that interview and they got interested. So that's is like, I won't even say it's a summary. I've given some details. But that's how we got to the Disney animation.
To that point. How would you describe the demand for locally produced content, especially when in relation to comics, animation, video games, and that whole industry?
There isn't much of a demand for it in Nigeria and in Africa as a whole. Now, most of the demand that I see comes from outside the continent.
Okay.
Because I will speak mostly from the Nigerian perspective, since I live in Nigeria. But of course, a lot of my colleagues at Kugali are from so many different countries in Africa. So I do know, I have a fair idea of what's happening everywhere else. But I can speak mostly from the Nigerian perspective. There isn't much of a demand for comics, for animation, or video games produced locally. And I think it's for 2 reasons. Number one, many people don't put much value on those things.
Okay.
It's not really seen as valuable. I'll tell you, one of the things that has amused me the most is that now people know characters like Iron Man, the Black Panther. They know these characters now because they have done live action movies. I've known these characters since I was a kid because I was reading the comics and watching the cartoons. So it's very strange to me when I see the people who used to bully me for liking those things.
Now
like they used to bully me for liking those things. They go to the cinema to watch it because it is now live action. They did not care about the exact same content when it was in animation form or comic book form. I will still tell you, one of the things that surprised me the most when I realized how ignorant most of these people were about these characters was when I was watching Captain America 3 in the cinema. That was the Civil War.
Yes.
And when the first scene where the Black Panther showed up in his suit, and there was a chase scene, and at the end of the chase scene, all the heroes there got arrested. So when they were arrested, he took off his mask. And as he took it off, you could see that it was the guy whose father had been killed earlier in the movie, the dark-skinned man. That was the person under the mask, which I knew, of course. But when he took off the mask, I heard half of the cinema go, "Whoa!" And I was shocked. I was like, "You mean they didn't know?" So all of them, because when he was taking off the mask, I was like, "What's all this FEZ? Why are they doing it in slow motion, like as if they want to do one big reveal?" Everybody knows who is there now. Only for him to make the reveal, and I heard half of the cinema go, "Oh!" I was now shocked. You mean all these people here didn't know? So they've never heard of the Black Panther. They're seeing this guy for the first time. They didn't even know it's the black guy that they saw earlier in the movie. I was just like, wow. These people, they don't know these characters. Yeah. They only know them now because they're in live action. So my point is, the average person here in this part of the world does not care about comics or animation. For one thing, they think it's for children only, which is, to me, is as silly as thinking that books are for children only or music is for children only, because everything it's a format. Content and format are two different things. If you give me a bottle, I can put any content inside.
Yeah.
You can give me a rubber bottle and I can put alcohol inside. Or I can put water or a soft drink or oil. The bottle does not change the content. The bottle is just how I'm presenting that content. I can put that same oil in a plate. I can put that same oil in a bucket. Most people are not, it surprises me, but I think most people are not smart enough to recognize that animation is just a format. The same way a book is just a format. You can have a book and it is for children. It is telling a bedtime story for children. You can also have a book and it is purely pornography.
Yeah.
Everything in that book is pornography, even though there are no images.
Yeah.
That doesn't stop the book from being... The book is just the container. What is the content? That's what we should ask. Many people, the moment they see animation, then as far as they're concerned, the content can only be for children. It's not possible to have animation that is for adults.
Yeah.
Or for... That's the way their brain works. The same thing with comics. The moment they see comics, it's for children. So because of that, many of these people they've already closed off their mind to animation and comics and video games as a viable means of entertainment. And whenever I hear things like, at your age you still play games, I reply with things like, at your age you still watch TV. They don't think of it that way. Why are they watching TV? Have they not outgrown the TV? If they've not outgrown the TV, why should I outgrow the game?
Okay.
So you see what I mean? Like, the content is one thing, the format is another thing. In this part of the world, I think there isn't much of a demand for the formats of animation, video games and comics. So most of the demand we've seen is from the US, Europe, Asia. As it is right now, the US is our biggest market. They are the ones that buy our comics the most.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to get there anytime soon?
I have no idea.
Okay. Fair enough. That's very fair. And there's some people who would say, if I've read the book, the comic, right, the live action might not, I may not be interested in live, because the live action kind of waters down some things. It doesn't carry as much of it than, where do you stand?
Okay, so if you're the kind of person that can enjoy beans separately and also enjoy akara separately and then also enjoy moi moi.
Are we talking food?
Is the same raw material but prepared in different ways. If you're like that, then I think you'd be able to enjoy the same, let's say, intellectual property, the same IP, the same kind of stories, but in different formats. But sometimes, when I think of stories like Game of Thrones, I've read the novels. I really struggled to watch the TV series. There was too much information missing. It was too watered down. And I kept wondering how the TV series got so popular. Because I was like, if this is what everybody else watched, how come this thing blew up? And I genuinely started asking people, wait, why do you like this show? Because I was confused. I wasn't trying to be a hater. I was actually confused that, okay, I've read book 1. Now that I watched season 1, I'm wondering if what I'm watching in this season 1 is what everybody else watched, how come this thing got popular? So then I started asking people who had not read the book, okay, what do you like about this TV show? Then when they explained to me what they liked, I then saw, okay, this is why they like it. So for example, someone told me very early on in the show, I think at the end of episode 1, something gruesome happened to one of the main characters at the end of the first episode. And someone told me that the moment that happened, he got hooked because he was like, wow, these people are not afraid to
sacrifice
this episode 1. This episode 1. He has not even watched episode 2 yet. So that was what got him hooked. So I understood where he was coming from. But my point is, for me, having read the book, I really struggled to watch the TV series. After watching season 1, I then read book 2. I tried to watch season 2. I gave up because it took me 3 attempts to finish the first episode of season 2 because it was so boring.
Ouch.
Like after knowing, like
Ouch.
it's like there was so much detail missing. So with that now, that's one example. But another example is, you look at, again, I'll use superhero movies. I've read some of the comics. The comics are very good with storytelling, but many times the fight scenes in comics, I don't enjoy them because I feel like
graphic enough.
Yes, I feel like they draw a picture where you see the two guys come like this. So I'm supposed to now imagine the fight, and then the next page, one of them is on the floor or something, but I didn't see enough of a fight to excite me. Then when you watch the movie, at least you see the full fight, so you enjoy it more. But then in the movie, a lot of the powers are watered down because they want it to hit a wide audience. So they're like, if we do it this much, people might not. It might turn a lot of people off. People that are not used to comics. So let's drop it to around this level. Those people can accept this level. They won't accept this, so let's drop it here. So the movies, one part is watered down, but the fights look more exciting to me than what I read in the comics. But then I think the best forms that I've seen, really, for me, for those superhero things, are usually the animated forms, because in the animated form you see the full fight, you get the full story. For most of the time, especially the animations that are aimed at older audiences, because if you watch the animations that are aimed at younger audiences, they can be lacking in the dialogue because they have to make it child safe. But when you read the comics, many times those comics are not that child safe. The comics are aiming for an older audience, but the animation usually goes to the younger audience. So I think the best formats I've seen for like comic book storytelling, especially in that superhero genre, is usually animation that is aimed at older audiences. So I think you can enjoy multiple formats, but depending on the particular content, sometimes it's just, for example, like I said, I'm big on video games. Most video games, when they do a movie or an animation of it, it sucks. Most. In recent years, they've gotten better. The recent, The Last of Us, the Sonic the Hedgehog movie 1 and 2, Arcane from League of Legends. Arcane is one of the best animated shows I've ever watched, and it's coming from a video game. So I think in recent years they've gotten better, but if you look at the last like 20 years, most things that go from video games to another format, there's a drop in quality. So I guess the answer is on a case-by-case basis. Maybe that's what I should say. It's on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. So when that BBC interview happened, I think it was Hamid that made that statement that, kind of like went viral about kicking Disney's, butt. Yes, for choice of words. How has it been since then? Like, since that statement was made?
Okay, so have we kicked Disney's butt? No. So for context,
Yeah.
when he made that statement, what he was talking about is, if we are doing African stories justice, then nobody should be able to beat us in our home turf. Meaning that our stories should sell better in Africa than Disney stories do. So let me give you an example. I'll give 3 examples real quick. Bollywood.
Yeah.
As much as they export their movies to the rest of the world, I'm very sure that the biggest Hollywood movies don't outsell the biggest Bollywood movies in India. In India. If you're in India, you cannot tell me that, I don't know, Fast and Furious 10.
Yeah.
Fast and Furious 10 is outselling the biggest Indian movie. It won't happen. Not in their own, on their own turf. It won't happen. Same thing when you look at like Korean shows. Yes, they are also exporting to the rest of the world, but first in their own home turf. Even look at Nigerian music. As much as we still consume a lot of foreign music, but who tops the chart in Nigeria? It's always a Nigerian musician. Maybe like 10-15 years ago it wasn't like that, but now Nigerian musicians are always topping the chart in Nigeria. You will not see a foreign musician topping the chart here. So that was what Hamid was saying, that if we are doing African storytelling right, then, because if you hear the statement he said in Africa, if you watch that interview, he said we're going to keep this in Africa. Like, nobody should be able to beat us here if we're doing it right. The same way Japanese stories, manga and anime, they sell globally, but they are first dominating in their own homeland. So that was the dream, the vision. Global audience, global quality, but by Africans and for Africans. So we're not going to tweak it or like, okay, let's write this thing this way so that the Americans can
appeals to the American audience.
So that the Japanese can understand it. When the Japanese are doing their own thing, they're not doing it like, let's do it like this so that the Nigerians will understand it. They do what they like, what they love, what works for them.
Their creative genius.
And they do it so well that you that are not from their culture, you're still enjoying it, and you will now watch it with subtitles because you're even enjoying the way they are speaking their language. You don't even want to watch it in English. I don't know if you've noticed, but most people that watch anime would rather watch it in Japanese than to watch it in English, even if the English version is available. So if we do it right, if we do it well, we should get to the point where people would be watching an animated show made by Nigerians, and they'll be watching it in Hausa or Yoruba or Igbo
or Swahili.
Something from Uganda, and then it's in Swahili, and people prefer that to watching it in English because but you only get that effect if the quality is good. So it's not about, support me because I'm Nigerian, support your own. Are they doing the good enough quality? If the quality is not good enough, don't come and they are trying, for Nigerians. That was one thing from the get-go. We wanted to really avoid pandering to people just because of emotional
attachment.
Yes, these guys are Nigerian, these guys are African, support us. The quality has to be world standard. Right from when we started the podcast, we said, is anybody making anything of the quality that we grew up enjoying? So we grew up liking Dragon Ball Z, Digimon, Samurai X, Voltron. Is anybody in Africa making something of that quality? That was the question we were asking ourselves when we started the podcast. So we can't now be producing something whose quality is below that standard and then expecting that people will like it. If our quality is good enough, then nobody will be able to compete with us in our own home turf. That was the whole point of what Hamid was saying. So have we done that since then? I would say yes. If you look at our graphic novel Nani Volume 2, the artwork there, whenever I look at that book, I'm just proud that we made this thing. Look at this art. We made this. I'm happy when I see that. And the story, the the action. In fact, you know how I complain about, like, in many Marvel and DC comics, the fight scenes, I don't enjoy them because they seem to skip over the fight scenes. If you read Nani Volume 2, I'm focusing on Volume 2 because Volume 1, I think we were getting there, but in Volume 2, we really
got there,
got
like,
that.
hit it.
Yeah. So in Volume 2, the fight scenes, we didn't skip it. You read the fight scenes, the coloring, the graphics, everything on point. The story, it's a heartwarming story. There are reviews of Nani on YouTube. You could actually just type, like, in YouTube, Kugali Nani review or something, and hear what other people are saying. So it's not like, okay, is it because I'm the one that did it? Ziki wrote it, and I didn't read the entire script before we printed it. So when I was reading it just like a fan, like someone that didn't, because I didn't work directly on that particular comic. So there were some parts I was getting to that I didn't know what happened. I'm like, ooh, this is nice, this is nice. Same thing with our graphic novel, Cuckoo. That one is aimed at older audiences. It's black and white. It's very inspired by Berserk, which is a manga by Kentaro Mura. So it has that dark, gritty kind of. But I'm also proud of producing that. We have let me see which other one. Moringa is not yet out. That's why I don't really want to talk about that. But Moringa is coming out later this year. It's science fiction, and I think you guys will like that one too. But then even Iwaju that we're doing with Disney Animation, Iwaju is also coming out later this year. I'm proud of the quality. Like, I don't think it will come out and I would have to hide my face when people are like, so this is what you guys did.
Yeah.
I feel like when it comes out, people are going to go in with this expectation and then come out having seen this. It's a child-friendly story. It's going to be on Disney Plus, so it had to be child-friendly.
Yeah.
So don't go in with like Arcane expectations, because Arcane was aimed at older audiences.
Yeah.
But if you put Iwaju beside any other child-friendly animation, I'm proud of what we've done. So are we doing the quality of work that we talk about? Yes, I believe so. And I think we have more comics we're working on that in the next 2-3 years, you guys are going to see quite a few new comics that I feel like I'll be very proud of.
Yeah.
So there's that. Video games that's the main thing I want to do that we've not yet really started, because the barrier to entry for video games is much higher than that of comics and animation. And I will not put out a mediocre video game. I cannot. My pride will not allow me. So until we have the resources to do a game that I will be able to show anybody and say I did that.
What should we be able to place it? What should we be able to place side by side with what like your expectations?
Okay, so
there's like a video game.
Yeah. So
options.
For me, it's video games are all about having an experience where you participate. Compared with any other thing, everything else, novels, comics, animation, live action movies, you watch what is happening or you read what is happening. What is happening has already been set in stone. You have no role to play other than to consume. With video games, you are a participant. Even if there's a story they are telling, but you are taking part actively. So that experience where you're taking part, by the way, not all video games have a story. If you're playing a card game, there is no story there. It's just you and your opponents, who wins according to the rules of this card game. There's no story. So I'm not saying all video games have a story, but my point is they all have an experience. Now, is that experience very fun? Does it blow you away? Is it a means of escape from reality? Do you feel like you've just had a euphoric experience out of what you would normally have? Like, have I elevated you, taken you out of your normal state, and like you come out and like, wow, that was awesome. Like that's what I want. Like, if I don't get that, wow, that was awesome, then the game was not good enough. So And I say that because I don't want the goal to be production values only. Production values being there was a big budget, so the graphics looked amazing. But did you really actually have fun? Or you were just looking, oh, the pretty graphics? If that was all, then why didn't I just do an animation? If that is all there is to it, like, oh, big explosion, pretty graphics, and then after that, did you really enjoy the game though? That's the question. So like if I think of, we're in 2023, so I think it was 2021, the game of the year was Hades. And yeah, I believe it was 2021, Hades was game of the year. This is an independent game, not made by a big publisher. So it's 2D, everything is 2D, hand drawn. It didn't have a very big budget. I think the team that made it was roughly 6 people, if I'm correct. If not 6, maybe 8, 10. Yeah, these people are very experienced. They are masters in their industry. They've worked at big companies before. So it's not as if it's 6 new starters. But the point is the team was not large. But that game is so much fun. I think I sunk almost 200 hours into that game by the time I look at like I didn't play it in 2021. I think I played it in 2020. Okay, I played it in 2021. So I think it came out in 2020. I know I didn't play it the year it came out. But my point is that game is a great experience. It's not just about the production values. It's not as if their budget was that great. But the actual experience of playing it was very fun. So that is one thing I'm aiming to do. We'll eventually do it. We are not there yet.
So why do we need to tell African stories with these formats? We can just sit back and rely on DC, Marvel, like, they can just keep telling these stories. They already have a hang of the formats. Why do we want to tell our stories in these formats? Why is it important to?
I think there are 2 main reasons. Number one, I've already pointed out that people have their own preferred formats. Some people will never interact with a particular piece of content until it enters the format they consume.
True.
So the same, like I said, the same Marvel characters that when I was a kid, people would laugh at me for, like, look at this one, is Captain America, is reading Captain America. Now they are watching it, but they will not read it, but they will watch it. That same way, people like me, I hardly watch live action movies. I mean, yes, I watch a few, but in a year, realistically, I'm likely to watch about 5 or 6 live action movies in the whole year. Including, I'm not talking about going to cinema. I'm talking about even the one that I sat at home and I watched on a laptop. I'm likely to watch 5 or 6 in a whole year. So if that content now, you want someone like me to get that content, you're probably going to want to put it in animation or video game. So my point is, because different people gravitate towards different formats, then if you want a story to reach a wider audience, you have to put that story in more formats. So when I think of The Witcher started as as a novel, prose, written novel. After that, it went into video games. That was when I heard about it. The only reason I knew there was a novel is because there was a video game. Then some people didn't even know there was a novel or a video game because it didn't come into their own format until recently, that it became a TV show. Suddenly those people know The Witcher exists. So if we want certain stories to reach certain audiences, we have to put them in certain formats. So that's the first reason I would say it's important to tell African stories through these formats. Now, the second reason I would say it's important to tell African stories through these formats is certain formats just have a bigger pop culture influence than others. So look at Game of Thrones. I think the first novel was released in maybe 1988. The first book,
Yeah.
book 1, Game of Thrones. Then book 2, the name of the series is not Game of Thrones. The name of the series is The Song of Ice and Fire. But the first book is Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I think book 2 was like 92 or 94. I might be wrong on the exact years, but my point is, from like the very late 80s to early 2000s, the man released about 4 books. The books had a cult following. They had an audience. People were reading them. But it didn't become a global phenomenon until it hit the live action scene. Once it became a TV series, that's when it became a global phenomenon. So in that same way, some of our stories might not hit a certain zeitgeist until we do them in certain formats. And the reason it's important to have these stories become, let's say, global. Let me say the reason it's important to tell the stories by ourselves is because when other people tell your stories, there are too many reasons. You know what? Instead of listing reasons, let me tell you a story to emphasize it. I think that works better. So, most people listening to this have probably heard of Thor and Odin and Zeus and Hercules. Now, those are, I just mentioned 2 Scandinavian gods and 2 Greek gods.
Yeah.
But because right now, I think America has done the best job with spreading stories worldwide.
Yeah.
Other people have done too as well, but I think when Americans take a story and make a movie or a TV show or a game, they tend to make it global.
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but Greece is in Europe.
Yes.
It's not American.
No.
But Americans told those stories and it went global.
Yeah.
If they tell your story and they change anything about it, that is their version that goes global, not the original. Yours. So that's why all of us are pronouncing these characters as Thor and Odin. Though those are not the right pronunciations. Ask a Scandinavian person. It is Thor. Thor. Okay. That's the right pronunciation of that guy's name. Thor. So imagine you're from their side. You know that this guy is Thor. But anywhere you go, people are saying Thor. How many people do you want to correct? No, that's not the right pronunciation. No, it's not Thor. Yeah. How many people do you want to tell that it's Othin? Like that D is pronounced in a TH way. Yeah. I know I'm not getting it right, but it's like Othin. Okay. Something like that. It's not Odin. In the same way, before this Disney animation deal happened, I was worried when I started realizing these things, because I was like, wait, Disney can just do one cartoon now and Shango is one character, because I watched Moana and Maui. Yeah, he's not an American character, and I saw how Maui was singing, and it was a child-friendly stuff. I was like, that's how Disney can just do one story. And Songo, because we know they won't pronounce it Shango. So Songo will now be singing in English. Oh my God. I was picturing this thing and I was like, we are in trouble if we don't do this thing before these people do it. Yeah. So all of us here know about ninjas and samurai. Because they've already been popularized. How many people know about, let's say, our own stuff in the same way? Now, there's this video game called Overwatch. Okay. It's very, very big globally. And a few years ago, I remember I was watching a live stream. They had just released a new character in Overwatch, and her name was Orisa. That's supposed to be Orisha. Wow. But the developers, they must have done their research. Okay, Orisha is a Nigerian word for God. They shout, okay, let's call our character Orisha. But they didn't know the right pronunciation. They were probably reading it how it was spelt. Yeah. So they called that Orisa. Yeah. So I was watching a live stream, and the people that were streaming the game, this character had just dropped, so they were playing as the character and just talking about it, like, okay, this is the new character in Overwatch, Orisa. And in the game it says she's from Nigeria, so it's not as if it says she's from Nigeria. And if you watch the trailer, in the trailer she says, I am Orisa, and I'm watching this and I'm like, okay. So in the live stream chat, I then chat with the people that are playing the game and tell them, I'm from Nigeria. I'm from the tribe where that word is from.
Yeah.
The way this thing is pronounced is, of course, because I'm typing, I have to like explain it. I say,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
that S there, say it as an SH.
yeah.
I explained it. I told them this is the right pronunciation. And I was like, I'm not throwing shade. I was trying to be clear to them that I'm not attacking you. You're not the game developer.
Yeah.
You're just someone streaming
Yeah.
the game. I'm just telling you, me, I'm from that place. This is how it's meant to be pronounced. The guy was like, he read the comments on the live chat and he was like, okay, I get what you're saying. Maybe what you're saying is the politically correct way to say it. But I'm going to pronounce it how the developers pronounced it because it's their game. They've named their character Orisa.
True.
This was probably
Wow.
4 or 5 years ago. I don't remember when. So I look at those things and if you don't tell your stories, you now let somebody else. I'm just very happy that we are already doing it the way we are doing it, because now Iwaju is going to come out and you're not going to hear any Wakanda like accents with Americans with Americans trying to sound African.
Okay.
You're going to hear Nigerians voicing Nigerian characters. You're going to hear they'll speak Pidgin, they'll speak Yoruba, they'll speak English, and when they're speaking
Like
English,
the locals speak
the
it.
English will sound like the way we talk. They will say go and bath. They will not say have a they will not say bathe. They'll talk like us. Go and bath. And so I'm happy that we are already doing that.
Okay.
I don't know if I've actually fully answered
Yeah,
your
I
question.
think you have. But so now the thing would be, shouldn't we be afraid, or should we be cautious when we have these collaborations? Because some would say, Disney is like a very big, it's a big name, and we're still trying to grow the industry here. And with you in this collaboration with them, like the powers don't look like they are, the same. So how are we sure that we will still maintain, or we're still safe?
So if you look at Studio Ghibli in Japan,
Yeah.
they made Japanese stories, and in the I think 90s, maybe early 2000s, Disney was their distributor in the West. Even though right now you can get Studio Ghibli movies on Netflix. It's not because I don't know what kind of deal they had with Disney, but it wasn't like Disney had ownership.
Oh, okay.
Studio Ghibli owned what they created in Japan, and they could distribute it in the West through whoever they wanted. It was Disney before. I know it's on Netflix now. And the same way, when we create things and we collaborate with larger companies, sometimes they are going to own that thing. So for example, Disney owns the IP of Iwaju, meaning they could do more with that IP even if we are not involved. But trust me, they are smart enough to keep us involved because they recognize the value of telling the story in an authentic way. And especially all of this was because of Jennifer Lee, the creative director of Disney Animation. She was the one that made the bold move to do what Disney Animation has never done before, which is to collaborate with an external studio. It's so she, at least I can tell you that Jennifer Lee knows the value of letting the story be told by the owner of the story. She wrote and directed Frozen 1 and Frozen 2. And she's the first female director in Disney animation history. So she could see that problem. Like, wait, how is this company almost 100 years old and I am the first female director? So every story we've been getting for almost 100 years from that company has always been told by a man, and I think mostly Americans, because I think pretty much all the directors Disney Animation have had. So she said there are so many good stories in the world, and the stories of the world should be told by these people of the world. So she broke that that trend. She, apart from being the first female director, she was like, it's not just about that. What about people who have not had this opportunity to So she started. So I think that I'm speaking specifically for Disney Animation and Jennifer Lee as a person now. She won't be in that role forever. Someone else might go into that role later. But I think at least right now, I know the people I'm working with, their heart is in the right place. So I'm not afraid of, it's a big evil corporation that wants to, take advantage of us, or nah. But going forward, if you look at the direction the world is going now, I think at the end of the day, you still need to have at least a good amount of ownership of your own stories. So if, like I said, Disney owns Iwaju, but we own our own comics, and if we want to then do maybe an animated adaptation of any of our comics, whoever wants to adapt it we would have to have a common understanding. If we spoke with Disney or anybody else and they want to convert one of our comics to animation, and we say, okay, the writer has to be from the same place. Let's say it's a Ghanaian comic, like we have one comic, Lake of Tears. Then we say, okay, the writer has to be Ghanaian because Lake of Tears is a Ghanaian story. And if they don't agree to that, then we also will not agree to the deal. So I think, yes, we have to be careful, but I don't think there's a lot to be afraid of in that sense. I don't think it's like, we have to be afraid. I think we have to be smart, we have to be careful. But sometimes there are good ways to do business where both parties win. It's not always like one person has to be taking advantage of the other.
True. Just like we had the time when everyone is looking towards Nigerian music, African music, Afrobeats. Is this the time for the animation industry in Africa?
I don't think so. I think the fact that you are in a space makes you see a lot of what is happening in that space, and sometimes you might think it is bigger than it is. So for example, I know that Nigerians think that Nigerian music is the happening thing worldwide now, because that's what we are listening to here. And because it is played abroad now. When I say abroad, you go to almost any country, you can hear Nigerian music. So we then start thinking like, where are they happening? But the way I see it, we are just catching up with other people who have already been global. So for example, when I was in primary school, I was listening to Sean Paul. I was listening to, Sean Paul was like junior secondary school. Okay, Shaggy. Let's say Shaggy, who again? Those are Jamaicans, right? We're listening to Jamaican music.
True.
Right from the 90s, Jamaican music was global. Did that mean that Jamaican music had taken over the world? No, it just means when you're listening to global music, you get American music, you get Jamaican
Latin
music,
American,
you get, so those are the people at a global level. The fact that you have now gotten to that place level too doesn't suddenly mean you're the one that you're taking over. I think we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves. So in the same way, right now, if you productions from Africa in this space of animation, comics, if you are getting to a global level, we are not the only ones, and that's good for the industry as a whole. But I don't think it means like this is the big break yet. We are just simply catching up to being to everybody else who is already a global player, and we are still a very small drop in that ocean. Because if you see 100 animated shows come out in a year, 2 or 3 will be African. 2 or 3, and the remaining 97 that are non-African, probably the ones that get to award-winning level, most of them will be most likely Japanese, American, French. There would still be a lot that they came out, they were good, they were okay, but they didn't get to that level of this is an award-winning production. I think we're still far from that.
Okay.
So I think there's still a long way to go. We shouldn't get ahead of ourselves. I want to get, for me personally, it's not even animation. Yes, I'll keep doing that, but video games, I want to make a game that will win Game of the Year. I know that is not happening anytime soon.
Okay.
But happen, it will.
It will.
But
okay, so if
I'm
we're
not going to
setting a
deceive myself
timeline,
and say so.
so if we're setting a timeline, well, what timeline will we set for it?
Preferably, I would like it to happen before my 50s. Preferably.
Okay.
But realistically, I think I might be 10 to 15 years away from that.
10 to 15 years away from that.
Which is still before my 50s, because I'm in my early 30s now.
Okay.
But I will, if I don't hit the goal before my 50s, it doesn't mean I'll give up. I'll still keep trying. I'll still hit the goal. But I would just really love to do it before my 50s.
then.
So that I can do more again after, like, you know, by the time my career is over and I'm
It's
dead
not a
and gone,
fluke, it's-
let
yeah, you
me
do take it
have
again.
like, I've won Game of the Year like 3-4 times.
Yeah, yeah.
But if the first one is like when I'm already like getting to a 70, that might be the only one.
Okay, so for the animation industry, do you think it will maybe help diversify the film industry, which right now is receiving some global recognition? Or do you also think that maybe it's like the next move for the movie industry in Africa?
Okay, so the movie industry in Africa largely ignores animation. So if they do start getting into animation properly, that simply expands the pool. It means I don't think it's like the next frontier in that, oh, now everybody should do this. No, I
Okay.
just think it should just be an added option. So when you look at things like transportation, the more options you have, the better, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean everybody should leave the former ones and jump to only one new mode of transportation. The more we have, the better. Now, if we say animation is one vehicle for storytelling, and we are already doing a lot of live action, there are certain stories that just work better in animation because trying to pull them off with live action. If you watch a movie like Inside Out by Pixar, Inside Out is a very good family movie.
Yeah.
You can tell those same stories with live action, but it will just be much more difficult because the kind of visuals needed to tell those stories correctly, animation works better for those visuals. So I think the African movie industry as a whole, and Nollywood being the biggest in Africa,
Yeah.
needs to expand into animation, but it doesn't mean like that should then be what everybody is doing. It just needs to be an additional format that is used.
Okay, so tell us about your role at Kugali. 1, 2, the roles that are available at Kugali. So when I say roles, I mean what kind of talent would Kugali be looking out for? And if you're going to speak to someone, a child, a very young person who has a dream of, playing in the animation or the comic industry, knowing that this is just the beginning. By the time that young person is, like in their 20s or early 30s, it would be a massive industry, God willing, on the continent. How would you do that? So I hope you remember the 3.
Okay, so I'm head of publishing at Kugali, which means I'm leading the team that plans what stories we're going to tell in terms of comics, what stories, and the entire production process. So that means from the get-go, from the pitching phase, whether it's an internal writer, one of our own Kugali staff, or whether it's someone from outside the company that goes to our website and submits a pitch, we have to review those pitches, decide whether or not those stories fit what the kind of stories we want to tell. So it has to be either an African story or a story by an African. Now, what do I mean by that? An African story, yes. Maybe the story is set in Africa.
Okay.
Any country in Africa. And the writer is, even if the writer is in the diaspora, at least they need to, maybe they grew up here and relocated, or they grew up there but their parents are African, they still know some, we need to look at that.
The connection to Africa.
Yeah, so is it an African story? Number two, what if it is not an African story? That doesn't mean it's an automatic no. I'll give you an example. Voltron. Is Voltron a Japanese story? Let's look at it. What happens in Voltron? A team of pilots pilot giant robots to fight giant monsters across the galaxy. Where is Japan in that story? So what if an African wants to tell that type of story? Will I say you should? Will I say where is the African country here? If the story he came up with is set in planet whatever,
outside here,
and the story has giant robots piloted by children fighting giant monsters, so I'll say he should not tell that story. Why is it not? I kept talking about quality. Is it fun? Is it good? I think most of us that watch animation enjoyed Voltron when we were young. It's good quality, it's fun. So it's not necessarily a Japanese story in that sense. Also, is Scooby-Doo an American story? What is particularly American about a talking dog solving mysteries? So if a Nigerian now comes up with a story where a girl and her cat are solving mysteries in
whatever city or whatever town,
fine. But but the point is, we need to review it. Is it an African story, or is it being told by an African?
Okay.
And things like that. Then if we greenlight a story, okay, now that it has been greenlit, so we're doing a comic, who is going to draw it? Who is writing it? The person that submitted the story might not be qualified to write it. They might have a good idea and might not be able to execute on it. Okay. Or they might write it and need a co-writer.
Yeah.
For example, we've had a story submitted by a Nigerian, and the story was based on a creature called the Lukwata. Lukwatas are fictional creatures from Uganda. I was like, this guy is not going to write this story without a Ugandan co-writer.
Yeah.
I won't allow it. How will a Nigerian be writing a Lukwata story? I get it's fiction. It's this creature doesn't actually exist.
Yeah.
He can just check Google for what he can see about the creature and tell us a story about it. But I was like, a Ugandan has to be involved. At least even the character names, all the characters, the names should be Ugandan.
Yeah.
Who knows? There might be small traits, things like there are things that are very
details.
Oh, you gave me this thing in your left hand instead of your right hand. That means something to a Nigerian. It means nothing to some people from other places. I don't know what means something to Ugandans that we might need to put in the story because I don't live there. So we needed to get a Ugandan writer on board. So things like that. That's I think that's a summary of my role. I'm leading a team that makes those decisions. Of course, I'm not the only one in the team, but the publishing team does everything involved in creating a comic and publishing it, getting it out there. So I lead that team. And you asked what kind of roles exist at Kugali.
Yeah.
Well, right now I would say our major let's say the major groups, there's publishing, there's creative services, that's led by Hamid Ibrahim, my co-founder, and our creative services team is the team that does, let's say, business to business work. So we can do something for a client. So maybe we're not making a comic for ourselves, but we're making an augmented reality art exhibition for an art gallery, maybe.
Okay.
Or we're doing something for a museum, or we're doing an animated music video for a musician, something like that. So that creative services team is led by Hamid. We're doing a Snapchat lens for Black History Month, which we did.
Okay.
So
it's interesting.
Yeah, we've also done some Snapchat lenses to celebrate black. I think it was black athletes in the UK.
Okay.
So things like that. That's what the creative services team does. So obviously that means we'll need 2D artists, 3D artists, modeler, rigger, animator, concept artists, storyboard artists, this type of people. Hamid leads that team. Then obviously you need admin staff. Somebody has to. You need HR. You need finance. You need logistics.
Top 3 childhood comic.
Top 3 childhood comics. Probably Asterix and Obelix, Archie comics.
Okay.
Maybe Tintin.
Okay. Animation. Current. All time. Rather, not current. All time.
Okay, top 3
Yes,
animation
top 3.
all time. Code Geass, Dragon Ball, Digimon.
Okay. So let's do comic turned live action.
Comic turned live action. Pretty much the whole MCU. I mean, the recent phase hasn't been as good as the previous ones, but still, we have like 10 years of very good content.
So it's just going to be it. Nothing more.
Comic turned live action.
Yes.
I think for me, like the MCU summarizes it because, I think they did a very good job bringing up everything together like that. Everything else, I mean, there are some good Batman movies here and there. There are different ones with different qualities, and then there are some like Hellboy. The comics have a different vibe from the movies. The movies are very action heavy, while the comics are more mystery heavy. If you read the Hellboy comics, it's usually, yes, there's some action, but the core of the comic is solving a mystery. Why are children disappearing in this village? There's one spirit taking them away. How does he track down the spirits? That kind of thing. That's what the Hellboy. So I wouldn't say that was a good translation. Okay. And I know there are some movies that I might not even be aware that it started as a comic. So for example, Kick-Ass. I have some Kick-Ass comics. I've not read them yet, but I bought them I think last year. When I first watched that movie, I didn't know it was based on a comic. So there might be some movies I've watched that I think are good, and I might not even be aware it came from a comic. Okay. So if we're saying comic turned movie, I'll just say the MCU for the most part. And yeah.
How do you unwind?
Video games.
Which two would you anytime at all, in any mood, be your go-to?
For video games?
Yes.
The Legend of Zelda series, easy. Legend of Zelda series. Then I would say Super Smash Brothers for multiplayer games.
Okay. At the pace we're headed, comics, animation here on the continent, this is just me giving you an open slate for you to fill.
I'll just say 2 things. First of all, I know that we don't get much funding in this field on the continent. I mean, the people who have the money don't put their money in video games or animation or comic books. So I think the few of us that are doing the kind of work I'm doing at this level, I think it's up to us to prove to them that they can actually make their money and we can do what we want to do. So if you give me a couple billion naira, you will get your money back, because the movie or game I will make money. The video games industry makes more money than the movie and music industries combined.
Wait, are you talking of here on the continent, here in Africa, or anywhere?
Anywhere. Pick any location. Take their music industry, take their movie industry, add the money that is being made by those two, then check how much money games are making in that same region. It will be what games are making will be more. And these things are easy to verify. Google is there. Go and check on Google whether I'm wrong. Pick any country, look for the statistics. And the funny thing is, I didn't even know that when I fell in love with games. So it's not as if I got in it for the money. But now that I know this, I'm like, I want to make games because I love games.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I also end up making money. You have the money and you want to invest in this, invest in that, invest in real estate, bring some for me. Invest in me. At least I've already proven that I know how to do world quality work. See whether you will not make your money back. I'll do a very good game with your money. You make your money back. So that my point is, I think once we start proving, maybe Iwaju comes out, another show, Unique Studios are doing something, Comic Republic are doing something. These shows come out. These people start seeing that these things can make money. They bring their money into the industry. It's better for all of us. I mean, when I say they bring their money, I mean African investors that have the money, so that we don't rely solely on let's go and collaborate with Netflix and HBO and Disney animation. We need some support back home here. So that's one thing. And then the second thing I'll just say is dreams don't turn to dust. So that's one phrase. I got it from an Owl City song, and I really love that phrase because from when I've been a child till now, my dreams have been very unrealistic to many people. Very stupid dreams that don't make any sense, and I'm achieving all of them. So dreams don't turn to dust, people.
Okay, so I think that's the best way to actually wrap up this episode of ATR Careers. Dreams don't turn to dust, according to Tolu Olowofoyeku.
Just call me Tolu.
Okay. Tolu, the co-founder at Kugali Media. Keep telling stories. If your stories are legit, if your stories are original, if they are your stories, then it will take you to the global stage. And at the end of the day, you would not just become popular, you would be able to define who you are. And no one else will be able to define who exactly you are, and you can make some money off it. Thank you very much. I am Tony. This is Africa Tech Radio. Thank you again, Tolu, for the time.
Pleasure. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.